The first Helgan ships touched down on the surface of Vekta in 2129. It was as though the stars had finally answered humanity's cries. The land was rich with life, rolling meadows, vast freshwater lakes, and endless canopies of green stretching across continents. The air was warm and breathable, the seasons mild, and the soil astonishingly fertile. After years of loss, silence, and hardship, the settlers stepped into sunlight. Saw not a hostile frontier, but a paradise. Between 2129 and 2140, 12 colonies were founded across the planet's most temperate zones. Each settlement bore the ambition and order of the Helgas design. Efficient, sleek, and modular, capable of rapid growth but deeply embedded in the land. Unlike the bleak mining enclaves of Mars or the atmospheric domes of Luna, Vekta's colonies needed no shielding. Crops could be sown directly into the earth, rivers could be dammed and harnessed, livestock thrived. Within a decade, Vekta achieved the unthinkable: agricultural independence. Food production not only met demand, it surpassed it. Colony exported goods back to the orbital supply routes servicing Helgan's industrial platforms. For the first time in recorded colonial history, a new world was not a burden on its parent system. And at the heart of it all rose Vekta City. Built on the banks of the Saraloon River, in the center of the first terraformed archaeology zone, Vekta City was a jewel of the New World. The city became both a cultural and political capital. Skyscrapers of mirrored glass rose beside botanical towers and community gardens. Each street was a promise of what the future could look like. To the Helgan elite, Vekta was proof of corporate destiny fulfilled. But beneath the polished streets and sunlit plazas, tension simmered. Helgan, orbiting far away in the harsh life Alpha Centari, had paid the price for this Eden. Its people laboring in the dust, feeding the engines of paradise they would never live in. And paradise, as ever, was never meant to be shared equally. As the first wave of colonies matured into functioning societies, the logistical cracks in the UCA's centralized command structure became impossible to ignore. The dream of a unified Earth-led defense force coordinating security across dozens of light years quickly shattered underneath the weight of the slow communications, the centralized infrastructure, and unpredictable colonial politics. The UCA couldn't respond fast enough. Pirate incursions went unanswered. Trade disputes escalated into violence. Smuggling, black market, arms trading, and even anti-UCN militias began to take root in the shadows of distant colonies. The sprawling interstellar web was fraying at the edges. In response, the United Colonial Nations initiated one of the most ambitious reforms to date, the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance, or ISA. Rather than attempt direct military control from Seoul, the ISA concept restructured the whole colonial defense doctrine entirely. Under this system, each star system, or colonial zone, of sufficient size, would establish its own independent ISA command. These commands are locally funded and staffed by colonial administrations, but receive standardized training, equipment, and advisory support from the UCN. ISA duties were multifaceted: policing of local habitats, orbital stations and trade lanes, revenue collection, local defense. Crucially, ISA command did not fall under the authority of the UCA. Each operated independently, answering directly to civilian UCN appointees within their respective star systems. The result was a patchwork of semi-autonomous defense forces, bound by treaty but governed by the local interest. Budgets and manpower varied wildly between systems. Wealthier colonies like Vekta built formidable ICA forces, complete with capital-class ships and extensive orbital surveillance networks. Poorer systems scraped together what they could, converted cargo haulers and militia crews with second-hand weapons. The first official ISA commands: ISA Alpha Centari and ISA Altair. Alpha Centari, flush with Helgan corporate funding and the agricultural prosperity of Vekta, quickly fielded a capable force. Altair, anchored by the aquatic research colonies of Algier, took a more measured approach, favoring sensor nets, interceptor drones, and long-range monitoring over firepower. Though hailed by UCN officials as a necessary decentralization, critics warned of the future fragmentation. The independence of each ISA command, they argued, created silos of power, some of which might one day serve the creators more loyally than the UCN itself. But in the chaos of the early expansion age, ideals mattered less than the results. And for now, the ISA delivered order. The early years of the Vektan colony were anything but idyllic. Though the planet itself was generous, lush, fertile, and temperate, the realities of interstellar settlement remained harsh. Crop blights from unfamiliar soil chemistries, equipment failures, and disease outbreaks pushed the colony to the brink more than once. There were winters when rations ran low and entire districts were quarantined. There were riots, even mutinies. But the settlers endured, under the ironclad guidance of the Helgan Corporation's Colonial Governance Board, and with a population hardened by survivalism and the corporate ethics of self-sustainability, the Vektan colony clawed its way from instability to security. Arcologies rose across the Central Plains. Automated agricultural sectors went online. Biofactories synthesized medicines. Vekta had not only survived, it had stabilized. And as it did, Helgan's true value revealed itself. While the surface of Helgan remained hostile and uninhabitable to long-term civilian life, its orbiting space station, Helgan Orbital Platform 1 or HOP-1, proved to be the corporation's greatest asset. Positioned perfectly within Alpha Centari's core trade corridor, the station sat directly on the traffic artery between Earth and the outer colonies. It became a natural, logistical hub. Starships bound for the frontier stopped at HOP-1 to refuel supply and undergo maintenance. Dry dock facilities expanded rapidly. Orbital fuel tanks filled with Helgan processed energy materials were sold at astronomical prices. Specialized tankers began regular runs between the industrial sites on Helgan's surface and the emergent colonies of Altair and beyond. Economics shifted almost overnight. Helgan, once a cautionary tale of colonial hardship, became a keystone of interstellar commerce. The profits rolled in, first to pay for comfort goods, luxury imports, and advanced medical supplies for HOP-1's long-suffering personnel. But soon they funded much more. Expanded fabrication bays, shielded labs, security ships, a growing fleet of Helgan-owned and operated star frigates, all bearing the sigil of the rising corporate empire. Vekta provided stability, Helgan provided power. Together they formed a dual-core economy that began to rival entire systems in influence. And in time, some will come to say, in ambition. A revolutionary leap in communication technology redefined the relationship between the twin worlds of Vekta and Helgan. Thanks to the advancements in real-time entanglement-based data transfer, the once fragmented communication delay between the two planets was eliminated. For the first time, both worlds could speak, govern, and trade as one. Seizing the moment, the Vektan government announced the formation of Helgan Protectorate, a formal administrative union wherein both Helgan and Vekta would be governed directly from Vekta. Framed as a gesture of unity and efficiency, the arrangement streamlined governments, centralized economic flow, and tightened logistical cooperation between the two worlds. Under this new structure, Helgan's vast energy revenues, previously taxed and regulated through the ISA channels, were now funneled directly into Vekta's rapidly growing economic engine. In exchange, Vekta expanded its agricultural exports and luxury manufacturing shipments to Helgan, dramatically raising living standards on the otherwise harsh and industrialized world. The effect was immediate and profound. Employment soared to 95%. Public morale hit record highs. Trade between the worlds became seamless. To commemorate the union, a new emblem was unveiled. 3 interlinked arms, each inscribed with a single ideal: peace, justice, and freedom. It was adopted as official symbol of the Helgan Protectorate and adorned both military uniforms and civilian institutes alike. It came to represent not only economic success, but the vision of two worlds rising together, one providing strength, the other abundance. But while unity was the word on every diplomat's tongue, quiet questions lingered in the factories of Helgan and the halls of Vekta commerce. Whose justice? Whose peace? Whose freedom? For now, though, the banner flew high, and the stars watched silently. Riding a wave of growing autonomy and prosperity under the Helgan Protectorate, Vekta's colonial administration took another bold step: the official formation of the Helgan Militia, the first legally recognized planetary defense and civil service force outside of the traditional ISA, USA, or UCN military command structures. Publicly, the Helgan Militia was framed as necessary. With expanding trade routes, rising orbital traffic, and new settlements forming across the Protectorate, customs enforcement, civil policing, and ceremonial security could no longer rely solely on overstretched ISA detachments. a local force tailored to Helgan's unique needs and reporting directly to the Protectorate's government, was deemed both efficient and symbolic of Helgan's growing self-sufficiency. However, the announcement sent ripples of unease through the halls of ISA Alpha Centari. Though the militia was kept intentionally small and lightly armed, its duties limited to customs inspections, internal security, and official ceremonies, the ISA saw its creation as a challenge to its exclusive military mandate in the region. Critics within the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance warned that even a symbolic force, if allowed to grow unchecked, would evolve into something far more dangerous. As a result, a series of restrictions were imposed by the ISA. The Helgan's militia size was capped, heavy weaponry, military-grade vehicles, and autonomous combat platforms were prohibited. Most critically, all commanding officers in the Helgan militia were to be provided by the ISA. Helgan government complied. For now, yet among the working class Helghast, veterans of the early colonial trials, and the workers fueling Vekta's economy, the sight of their own uniform, marching under the banner of peace, justice, and freedom, awoke something long dormant: pride. For the first time since the founding of the colony, Helgan saw a force that bore their name, wore their colors, and stood in their streets. The ISA might hold the rank, but Helgan had taken its first steps towards standing on its own. After decades of hardship, investment, and relentless labor, Helgan had finally completed its industrial metamorphosis. Across the scarred plains of the Helgan wastes, fusion turbines now stood like monolithic spires, endlessly feeding the power-hungry refineries that churned beneath the choking skies. Enormous processing complexes, fully automated and resilient to the hostile environment, converted Helgan's raw elements into usable energy and high-grade materials with ruthless efficiency. The infrastructure was no longer colonial, it was imperial in scale. With its planetary industrial grid completed, the Helgan Corporation declared full economic self-sufficiency. No longer reliant on imports for tools, fuel, or infrastructure components, Helgan could manufacture everything it needed, and export far more. From orbital fuel depots to heavy reactor cores, their goods flowed through the arteries of interstellar commerce. The energy trade alone had made Helgan indispensable. Passing colonial ships, frontier settlements, even the aging infrastructure of Earth itself all depended on Helgan's exported energy. With every tanker that left Hop 1, with every solar relay calibrated by Helgan engineers, their influence deepened, their wealth multiplied, and with wealth came power. Though the corporation still maintained token offices and representatives on Earth, its true center of operations had long since moved to Vekta. The towering corporate archaeologies in Vekta City housed Helgan's exclusive board, legal courts, and financial headquarters. Most of its operations, logistics, military contracting, resource pricing were now overseen from within the Protectorate, and by Helgans. By mid-year, the UCN officially acknowledged that over 92% of Helgan's corporate assets were no longer Earth-based. It was on paper still a UCN-regulated entity, but in reality, Helgan was becoming something more. A self-sustaining corporate superpower with the reach of a nation-state, the protection of a world, and the loyalty of millions across 2 planets. And behind it all, quietly steering the course of history, was not Earth or the ISA, but a company with no flag, no borders, only a future of its own design. As the populations of Vekta and Helghan swelled and the logistics of interplanetary governments grew increasingly tangled, the Helgan Corporation made its most decisive political move yet. The transformation from a corporate entity into a civil administrative, framed as a pragmatic response to bureaucratic inefficiencies. The corporation petitioned the UCN and ISA Alpha Centari for an extended charter, one that would authorize it to assume full local government's responsibilities across both worlds. The request passed with little resistance, largely due to the corporation's proven track record in stabilizing Helgan's economy and Vekta's infrastructure, and due to growing disinterest or inability of Earth's governing bodies to maintain direct control. Under this new charter, the Helgan Corporation became the de facto government of the Protectorate. Its new powers were sweeping. The ISA withdrew from most civil functions. The corporation granted the right to levy taxes on all Protectorate citizens and commercial interests. Public services reorganized into sector divisions. A new civil identity registry replaced UCN's colonial IDs. For most citizens, the transition felt seamless, efficient even. Government buildings were rebranded, uniforms changed, and service delivery improved. Lines shortened, roads were repaired, utility grids modernized. On the surface, the system worked. But there were limits, reminders that the Protectorate, for all its independence, was not entirely free. The ISA imposed strict conditions on the expanded charter, primarily aimed at containing Helgan's ambitions. Ship construction quotas remained tightly regulated. Orbital industrial zones required ISA authorizations for expansion. Any colonial ventures beyond the current system borders were explicitly prohibited without USCN oversight and approval. Helgan accepted these restrictions, but within its newly built ministries of planning and aerospace, new maps were being drawn, new shipyards quietly budgeted, and new stars marked in red. The corporation now wore the robes of government, but it never forgotten it was still at core a machine designed to grow, to expand, and to adore. Decades of disciplined governance, booming trade, and tight fiscal control had borne fruit. For the sixth consecutive year, the Helgan administration posed a significant tax surplus, surpassing all colonial zones and even several UCN planetary blocks in economic output. While unlike many governments, the Helgan civil leadership, still rooted in corporate tradition, refused to overspend or redistribute the wealth carelessly. Instead, the surplus was stockpiled. By 2155, the Disaster Contingency Fund had ballooned into one of the largest concentrated reserves of capital in human history, rivaled only by the Interplanetary Banking Guild and Earth's own Central Reserve. The war chest of this magnitude and a self-sustaining industrial and food infrastructure already in place, the Helgan leadership made a move few thought possible. They offered to purchase the Alpha Centari System outright. The proposal was staggering in its scope. Rather than continue sending yearly tithes, mandatory contributions in taxes, resources, and political support to Earth through the UCN and the ISA, the Helgan Protectorate proposed to transition to a fee-based services model. Under this system, they would remain a member of the UCN and receive ISA services as needed, but on a contractual basis, not as a subordinate entity. In effect, it was the privatization of an entire star system. Under normal conditions, such a proposal would have been summarily rejected by Earth's political council and the UCN Assembly. But in 2155, the UCN was struggling, overextended by rising tensions in the Outer Rim, the explosive costs of new colonial expeditions in the Perseus Corridor, and mounting unrest in the Jupiter Expanse. Budgets were bleeding red, and support for expansionism was fading fast back home. Helgan's offer was simply too good to refuse. After weeks of negotiation, the deal was ratified under emergency fiscal provisions. The Alpha Centari System, including Vekta, Helgan, and all established orbital infrastructure, would remain within the UCN Charter, but now operated under a leasehold sovereignty model. In exchange, Helgan would provide a massive lump sum payment to the UCN, equal to several decades' worth of projected contributions, a service fee structure to fund the continued presence of the ISA Alpha Centauri, now officially acting as a contracted peacekeeping and oversight force, continued nominal recognition of UCN authority, primarily ceremonial. To the public, it was portrayed as an advanced step in decentralizing UCN authority, an evolution to interstellar governments. To Helgan, it was something far greater. They had purchased their system with coin, not blood, and now for the first time in human history, the corporate government owned a star.